Live from Miami Beach in Southeast Florida. This is CFI Boot Camp with the Power Hour. Welcome.
Hello and welcome, but we are not in Miami Beach today. Today I was actually able to muster up the courage to get back to Northern California. So I'm streaming from near San Francisco in San Jose, California. So on the way to our other location today. I haven't been here for 5.5 months. So I braved the storm yesterday and wore a mask the whole day from the time I got into the Uber until the time I got here, exception of a few little places. So that worked out okay. I flew an American. I think I left Miami at 11 and I got here at about 5 p.m. So it took about 7 hours or so to get here with a stop in Dallas. But anyway, I'm not in Miami Beach today, which is very rare. So here I am streaming from San Francisco. And what I wanted to today, I have a few things for you. The first thing is today is going to be on how to teach from commercially generated lesson plans. And there is a big disconnect in our industry between real lesson plans an educator uses and CFI lesson plans that we're required to make for a practical test. So I wanted to dwell on that a little bit, or sort of go over that a little bit. And then on top of that, I want to show you what I've laid out the next power hours for the next until October. And so you can see them now. And so, and there's a page, you'll get an email from us, which will have, you'll be able to see them all. So there's that. And I want to just go through those kind of quickly, just not go through them, I'll show you where it's at. So the email looks like this, which you can see now. And then it has the August power hours, which is this one. It's going to be how to teach from our lesson plans. And I don't know why it says August the 13th. But anyway, we'll check the dates. The next one, Saturday, will be 8s on Pylons, a real deep dive into that maneuver, including the mathematics that make it so. And you'll finally understand why there's a constant. When you determine pivotal altitude and you divide it by 11.3, you just might get the answer to why it's 11.3 tomorrow or the next week. Then we're going to have our interview with an A&P, which we're going to do today, but we couldn't get the right assets all together. So it'll be a question and answer sort of show by chat and a presentation about the key things that pilots we would like to see them do differently and things like that. So, and then in September, we have how to use your iPad as your only teaching tool. So it's basically what I use. We're going to have interviews with previous CFI Bootcamp students who have passed their checkrides already and see what their tips for success was. And then we'll have a live zoom in to the class on the 19th of September. We'll be having a live class there in Miami, and so, or here, one or the other. And that will be a tour of all the apps that we use during the class and with our students at CFI Bootcamp. So on the Apple store or the Google Play Store, there are tons of aviation apps. 90% of them complete garbage, a complete waste of time, right? All designed by a 14-year-old kid who, for flight sim, or who's never going to update the app again. It's free, of course, right? But there are others that are just dead gorgeous, ready to go. And also we'll teach you that don't have the Apple Store mentality of it should everything is 99 cents, and if it's $10, it's the end of the world. There really is value in a lot of things that you can get from that you can make money with. So we'll go through all that, and you'll see the exact ones that we use, and I'll stream our iPad live so you can see them, and you can screenshot them or take pictures of the screen if you want, or probably we'll probably make a list. I would assume we make a list. Then we're going to do this one today. We'll repeat it again. And then in October, we're going to use how to use a GFA tool. It's a graphical forecast for aviation to replace the area forecast. And then we're going to start a new series every once in a while because I like to keep things here mostly technical content. We are going to do some marketing. So marketing tips, because CFIs are historically bad marketers, right? You probably know that already. Your pilot's not built to be salespeople, or not built to be marketers and see how. So things like how you set your rate in your area, how you determine what you should set, so you don't leave money on the table, because you can charge $20 an hour if you want, everybody, and be the low person on the totem pole. But what if you could have charged $65 an hour and all the other people would have said yes anyway, right? So you just left $40 bucks on the table, right, per hour. So we'll talk about these kind of things. How do you know that? How do you sell yourself against other CFIs, which is a big one, especially the more experienced one. and how you approach a student when they come to the door, those kind of things. And then we'll evolve this into things like how you know if you're making money, spreadsheets about profit and loss, simple things, how to determine if you're making any money or not, what you can expense, what you can't expense. We'll go through all those things. So those will be separate live power hours, and they'll be centric to the marketing side of things. All right, so now that you know what we're going to do, that's good. Our next class, by the way, CFI class, is September the 14th. Currently set for Palo Alto and Miami both. We're sold out in Palo Alto, so if you're going to come to that, you'll need to come to Miami. There's still plenty of space for online, but not so to say plenty. We typically limit the classes to around 10, 12, not more than 12, because we have to give some attention to each person. And if we make it 20 people, then I think your experience would be, well, it was great. It was just like being in one big lecture hall, and that's not what we want. So anyway, there's that. Now let me share the new thing. We just finished our upgrades to the lesson plans. So they're in the Dropbox. If you have them from before, then you'll see a new version. I'll show you what it looks like. And we put a lot of time in there because of all the complaints we get, which are very few, I have to say. When we get them, it's mostly around typos and around wrong things in the lesson plans or things like that. And so anyway, so what I decided to do is just take a massive effort to clean up all that. Now, the fun thing, a bad thing, is that once you've created all this content, you start not seeing the errors because you see the same thing over and over. Your eye just kind of skips it all because you think you've seen it all, whatever reason. So we have to vet this. And the other thing is for you to know is that these lesson plans were created originally in Word. And then they they were actually created in native Adobe Acrobat, which is probably the worst idea ever, right? Because if you talk to the people at Adobe, they say, well, don't create things in Adobe. It's a document format, right? You take other things and you push it into our format, then you can transport it around, but you do all your editing and all your stuff in the source document. And that's what makes it portable. We don't make an editor, really. And I'm like, well, that's kind of bad because that's what we did. So then there's an export feature, which you can take this document and you can export it into Word, and it mostly works. I'll say mostly, but there are a few places where it gets a little corrupted. So we're working with that a little bit. And what I was able to do with that, I was able to convert everything into a Word document, at least mostly in text. Everything mostly came through, and I was able to spell check, grammar check, and do a lot of things in that document, as well as shift around content. So this is new. And if you look at it, you'll know it's new. And the way you'll know it's new is because you'll look at the title, and we're starting to put the editions now. When we make a new book or we update one, we're going to put the edition it is here. Because previously you had to look at the file name. Because if you look at this file name, it says Lesson Plans July 31st, 2020. And that's helpful, but it's not really that great. If I say the third edition is the newest edition, then you can just look at the book cover and see that. We'll put that in the title as well. So anyway, that's what's been done. And so I don't know what other companies do, but there's plenty of lesson plans on the market. So now that I've sort of set all the stuff up and told you, and these come to you for free. I mean, you don't need to pay for another lesson plan to get the upgrade, because we wanted to do this from day one. We usually give you a year, by the way, and then we'll charge you from that point forward usually. But in general, it's not a lifetime thing because we couldn't possibly stay in business like that, but we can certainly do a year. And then, because a lot of times I'm creating even more content. So the other things that will be out will be we call it the What to Say book, but it's basically how to teach private and commercial maneuvers, what to say in the airplane specifically while you're doing the maneuver, or what you need to bring out for every single maneuver. So that is now complete to the extent I'm going to make it complete. I would like to put some figures and things in, but that's going to come later. So we're going to put that as revision 1, and it's complete as it is, and I think that'll be out in a week or two. All right, anyway, so let's move on, and let's just talk about lesson plans in general, commercially developed lesson plans. All right, so the thing to think about here, and if you can go back and look, last year I did an interview with AOPA Flight School Business. And actually the article that we did was Article of the Year, which is kind of nice for us, and nice, I guess. They really liked it. And one of the things we talked about was doing it right, CFI training, doing it right. And we got to the point on lesson plans. And, sort of I begin to roll my eyes back in my head going like, this is the same topic over and over and over again, and no one seems to get it. Let me tell you what other flight schools do, most schools do, and why we don't do it that way, and how you can sort of manage this. So when you go to a CFI school, and there are plenty of them out there, not us, one of the things that one of the schools does is they have you start creating your own lesson plans. And they create a lesson plan for everything, right? And so, for example, we just had a student at our location who had finished that other flight school and said, all I really did was do lesson plans. So I really don't feel like I have enough knowledge. So they came to our side to do the rest of it. Okay, not a bad strategy. But he's saying like the first 4 days we're doing lesson plan on steep turns. Like it took like 9 hours. And then what would happen is the person would come into the room, give us 2 hours with a guidance and then leave. And then the rest of it was us working on lesson plans. So historically, the reason that is true with most places, if you ask most schools, CFI schools, all they really do is say, well, we're going to talk about how to create your own lesson plans. And that's sort of like reinventing the wheel to me. It's like, well, you imagine if now look at all the online courses and all of the high schools and all the colleges that are now having to shift to online. Do you think that every time that they have a new teacher, that the new teacher generates all the lesson plans for everything they do? That would be ridiculous, right? So, and the other thing we get, which is really another common thing that happens, is I thought the CFI class would be you showing me how to teach specifically how to teach these maneuvers. Not really. We can show you a little bit, but the idea for that is, think about an educator. If you go get a degree in education, do you think that what happens is you go like, okay, Sally, today what we're going to do is I'm going to sit down and teach and show you how to teach this module in algebra. And then I'm going to show you how to teach the next module. No, this is not done. There would be not enough time in the universe for that to happen. So what happens is we're going to teach you firstly how to be an educator and what you need to look for and the techniques of teaching. And then how you teach it is up to you, right? How you decide the examples you want to present on the board and the way you work with your individual class, because maybe you have slow learners or fast learners or that's up to you. You'll decide that. And the assessments can be standard. So there's no real thing about, okay, now I'm going to show you the nuances of flying from the right seat while you teach a chandelle. There's no time in the world for that. We would not have enough time to teach every 80 maneuvers. It wouldn't be possible. So we have to give you a background in education, and part of that is the lesson plans. So driving it sort of backwards to say, well, why did you tell me all that? Was because that if I teach a class, and wherever I taught some math classes and such, that I look at the syllabus for the class. So the syllabus drives what I have to teach in the time frame that the class is. So a quarter system, a semester system, or whatever the thing is. Or in aviation, it would be the duration of the private pilot curriculum. And I look at the class I'm going to teach, which is it's the ground component, aeronautical knowledge. And I look at each lesson and it says you have like 2 hours to do this, and you have an hour to do that, and you have 3 hours, whatever those times are. Or I have Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 2 hours block each. And I have to decide how I'm going to cover everything in the syllabus within that time period. And like magic, that's what the lesson plan is for. It's to drive a single instructional period. So it is not designed to cover the whole world. It's designed to be the outline for that thing. Now, the big disconnect, of course, we have in aviation is that here we have to have all these lesson plans, right? And the lesson plans are not for a single instructional period. They're for a specific maneuver. And not only are they for a specific maneuver that is a student that you would give as a student brief, but they're to show the examiner who's going to be doing the exam for you that you know everything in the world about Lazy 8 in addition. And so the briefing goes like 30 minutes or sometimes more, sometimes 40 minutes. And if you had a real student, and imagine you had to do like briefings on steep turns, slow flight, power off stalls, power on stalls, and something else. And each one of those were like 30, 40 minutes long. I mean, that's all you do. You wouldn't ever get to the airplane. So then you start thinking, well, what is the lesson plan really? Well, it's an outline. It should never be anything more than an outline. It can be more than that for you, but for the student, I mean, what I mean by that is if you need more information about whatever it is, or you need an image or something, yes, then take our lesson plan, take someone else's and put that stuff at the end or somewhere in a separate binder or folder so you have it. So anyway, back to the school part. These schools having you make lesson plans, and you say, well, why are we doing that, right? They don't just have lesson plans to give to me? And now the wicked truth of it comes out, which is in this country, two things. You know every single test question within a couple percent of what's going to be on the FAA knowledge test, which means it's not a test, right? It's an exercise in memorization. It can be useful, but in general, I consider it a big bunch of garbage, right? That you just look at the question and you look at the right answer and you drill that 1,000 times, you get a 95% on the test, but yet you don't know anything. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that when you go into a flight school and you're prepared for the ground portion, for the oral, call it portion, I can tell you within about 80% of surety, you know what's going to be on that test. You're not using FAA's not picking random pilot examiners for you. You're picking the same one over and over and over again, and the tests don't change by that much, right? So therefore, what you have all the way through private, all the way through commercial, is every single time you went to a test, number one, you took a knowledge test, which you didn't have to know really anything to pass it, not much. The second thing is you had an oral exam, which you knew about 80%. And if you failed, then you probably could just the differences, right? You could go back. So you wouldn't have to go through another course of training. So now when you come up to the CFI, you have a commercial pilot certificate in your pocket, but you really don't have this knowledge. You just don't. So you go like, well, that's bad because now I got to teach it. Well, now you're at that position, right? So the reason these schools have you do the lesson plans, now you should be able to see, is that it helps you look and see what you don't know so you can shore up your own knowledge while you're creating your own lesson plans. If it were true that we had real knowledge tests and real oral exams and everything were real and high standard, you already have the knowledge, then you could just use anybody's lesson. You could look at the lesson plan and say, well, that works for me or that doesn't. So that's the reason. So then we go like, how do we fix that? Well, we fixed it by producing a 42-hour online course that covers all the aeronautical knowledge over again, plus the practical aspects and the teaching side of things. So we did that. So within about 20 hours or so, we can get the knowledge up. The aerodynamics, the airspace, the stuff that maybe you just knew what was going to be on the test. They're only going to ask this, right? For example, risk management. I'll bet you, if you come here to South Florida and I don't tell you you're going to be tested on risk management, you probably won't pass that segment. But yet, if you go back to San Jose, California, Palo Alto, you'll probably pass the risk management section because it really isn't tested that thoroughly here and there. But the guy here in South Florida, he tests for an hour and a half, really detailed. So you see what I'm getting at, right? So I need to take in the online course, we needed to put the whole thing together and make sure the aeronautical knowledge is all there. And then we do more than that. But I mean, that's the basic premise of it. Because at the end, what I want to create or what I think you should be looking for is our outlines. And the outlines are what am I going to teach when? All right, now let's move into the next segment, which is the differences between a maneuvers-based lesson plan, which is like a steep turn, and an academics lesson plan, like aeromedical factors, aerodynamics. There is a difference in the way your lesson plan is going to look. So let's look at one. So I'm going to bring up a whiteboard here. And I want to show you what a typical outline, an FAA outline for this kind of thing is. So let me grab it here. So the first thing you have is a title of your lesson. So steep turns, or whatever. We can leave it blank for a moment. Then the next thing we'll have an objective. So the objective is like, is what is going to be done within this lesson and how will we know when it's finished, kind of thing. So if it were a steep turn, for example, I would say the objective is at the end is for the student to be able to perform 2 360-degree level turns in opposite directions at 45 degrees of bank while maintaining heading, altitude, airspeed, and coordination. That'd be the objective. And so then the lesson should support that. And then we have a motivation. And so the motivation is, why in the world am I doing this? Because if you ever come to one of our CFI classes, the one thing you would know straight away when we talk about the fundamentals instructing is the most important thing in the fundamentals instructing, and it is motivation. Without motivation, the rest of the book, you can just throw it in the garbage because it doesn't matter. You have to be motivated to learn. If you have no motivation to learn, it's irrelevant. It doesn't seem to be consistent with flying or whatever it is, then the student isn't going to learn it because they just think it's whatever. So like, for example, today you showed up to the power hour because it's interesting to you, right? And you're motivated to be here. right? If this were a topic on playing the flute, I don't know if you'd join. Right? I don't know that you'd be here because you have no motivation for that. I'm sure that class was available today somewhere. So the motivation is, how does it relate to what I need to know? So, for example, the motivation on a steep turn would be, you could use this to avoid an encounter with cloud, an encounter with airspace, an encounter with terrain, and also for the ego. Don't forget, pilots have big egos. Don't forget that. And so you can play that too. You can say, well, we're going to learn to be maneuvering the airplane very close to its performance limits today. So we'll be operating the airplane, learning how to control it at near its load limit. And like, oh boy, some people, that's like either scary or very interesting. So it's how they have visions of that Top Gun movie. It comes into their head, right? So, okay, so it's motivation. And then after that, then you have what the FAA calls the elements, which in our stuff we call the presentation. So it's the actual line items that make up this steep turn. And there's how many of them, 15 or 10 or 12 or 3, whatever these items are. That's the hard part when you're generating your own, by the way. It's generating the objective and the elements, because half the time you'll miss a bunch of elements. That's why you really want to use someone else's lesson plans, because they'll all be there. And then we get to the schedule, which is how long it's going to take. How long is it going to take to do this lesson? This is a pretty important thing, because here's a big tip for you. When you teach this stuff to a student, if you don't establish how long it's going to take before you start the lesson, you've made a grand mistake, because the student didn't come to the airport, unless you told them, to listen to a 20-minute lecture on something. They came to go straight to the airplane and do what they're going to do in the airplane. Right? That's what they came for. So if you don't establish the time, it's sort of like looking at a PowerPoint presentation that has the pages and paragraphs on each slide. And your question is, what after you suffered through about 5 of those, is you go like, is there 2 more left, or are there 95 left, is what you want to know. And no one has said. And so you're like, oh my God, how am I going to, it's the same with the students. So you lose their attention, motivation. So you have to say, this is going to take 15 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour, whatever that is. That's what you've got to do. All right. Then after the schedule comes the equipment. What do you need? So remember, when we would go to certain schools where there were no marker pens. They didn't have any. And so this meant that that you had to bring your own. And when you go into the school, and the nearest like office depot is like 5 miles away or something. So then and if you need a model airplane, you put all that on there. Now here's where the disconnect is between the maneuvers and the academics. So it's the instructor's action and student's action. Just one second. So when you're teaching a maneuver, the instructor's action and student's action are always the same. There are really no differences, because the flying part is the easy part about aviation. The flying is, any monkey can do it after a while. I mean, it's hard skill to acquire, but it's really not. And the teaching of it, if you really look at it, here's what you get. You could actually get away with this. You could say, I really don't know how to teach very well, if at all. So what I'm going to do is, I'll go out to the airplane. We'll give a small briefing. We're going to do a steep turn today. And the most important things are keep it level in the turn, and say 5 things, and go to the airplane and say, okay, now here it is. I'll show you how to do it. Then you do it. And then you go like, you do it. And then they don't do it very well. And you tell them, okay, I didn't do it very well. Try it again. What did I do wrong? You didn't hold altitude. And with enough iteration there, you could they teach it to themselves. They would go, okay, I guess could I pull back? Is that right here? Is that right? Yeah, that's right. Okay. Well, that's wrong. Let me show you again. With enough iteration, you'd get it right, because flying isn't hard, right? It's just procedural things. And so then, but that's the skill of the teacher, isn't there? That's a new CFI who went to some terrible school, doesn't have any knowledge, and doesn't know how to teach. And so it takes him 80 hours to get through a student that could have been done in 50 hours, right? Or 45, or whatever the case is. That's why you want to pay for good instruction, by the way, is so you don't get into that mess. But anyway, so here's the actions. So I'll write them here because they're the same. So the first thing, it's the teaching process. Explain it. Next part is to demonstrate. Then student practice. And then finally, it's evaluate. That's all you ever do, really. Sad to say, but when you're out in the airplane, all you ever do is explain something before you go, demonstrate it in flight, student practices it, and you evaluate it. Now, how good you get at this, well, there's the secret sauce. But for now, so what we do in our lesson plans is we remove the instructor's actions and students' actions because they're always the same. So we don't feel compelled. So instructor's action, we explain the steep turn on the ground, make sure the student can understand it before you go. The demonstrate is now I'll demonstrate the maneuver to the student, left turn and a right turn. Then I'll allow a student to practice, and then I'll evaluate it. Okay, and then so the student's actions then are those. So that's that. Okay, now then after that, then you have completion standards. So what are there any completion standards? If they're ACS standards, because you're nearing. By the way, those are for certification, not for training. Training in the beginning is going to be not those because the student doesn't know how to do it, and so it's up to each individual student as to how they will perform and what you'll think is acceptable for that student, because you have to know the student. What's good for one student may be not achievable in that same lesson for the other student, or vice versa. So anyway, but the completion standard at the end are the worst pilot we want to make. The ACS is the absolute worst pilot we ever want to certificate. That's the minimum standard. So the standard of the student needs to always be better than that. And then last is common errors. These are, you can find them in the airplane flying handbook for each maneuver, and you can find them in the flight instructor PTS. Okay, so this is a structure of the lesson plan. And this is how you would create it. This is the old FAA structure. It's been around forever. And that's how that goes. Now, let's look at a lesson plan for an academic setting. So it would be the same. There's a title. There's an objective, motivation. The elements and the instructor-student's actions are going to differ here. So, for example, let's say I'm going to teach airspace. So then, and let's say it's a classroom setting, not just an individual lesson. I'm doing a ground school. Well, the first thing I need to know is who my learners are. What background do they have? Like, are they all flying now? Have they never seen an airplane before? Then I need to know, are they visual learners, or any in the class impaired in one way, like they can't hear? Or do they have a particular preference to auditory learning? Are they kinesthetic? They're pretty much just learn by doing. So then I have to think, okay, so my lesson has to address all types of learners in a classroom setting. If it's an individual one, you'll know your student. But it could be a visual learner, so I need to put visual things in. Is it an auditory learner? I need auditory, narration, I need sort of that kind of thing. Or the kinesthetic, I need demonstrations, experiments, that kind of thing. Okay, so then I would, based upon what I think, then I would say, so the first thing I need to do is lecture for 15 minutes on the airspace. So I say lecture, airspace, 15 minutes. The second thing I do is use SkyVector, which is an online sort of website, which has sectional charts and various things, and use SkyVector and demonstrate what the airspace looks like and where it's located for all classes of airspace. And that's 15 more minutes. And the next thing for that is then to give a quiz. Now I'm going to give a quiz, a 5 or 10 question quiz. Or we use CFI Bootcamp's airspace flashcards for that, same thing. And then have them go through that. And then the next thing is then, or answer questions maybe before that for 10 minutes, then give the quiz. And then after that, another 10 minutes of reviewing the answers. So that's different than just explain something, go demonstrate it, student practice, evaluate. So there's more to it here. And maybe I have to bring in other sorts of demonstrations, or I have to have play some segment of a video. So that's what goes on the lesson plan. In today's lesson of an hour, I've got to do these things, right? So that's what's important. So depending on your school and the environment you teach in, 141, 61, I don't know how much time you're going to have for each lesson you're going to give, but you need to have a lesson plan that makes that fit, that says, okay, I have 2 hours, here's what I can get through in 2 hours. So as an example, ASA makes a private pilot syllabus. And in that private pilot syllabus, the very first lesson is 2 hours of aerodynamics and 1 hour flight. To me, 2 hours of aerodynamics for a brand new student is an awful lot. So what I do is I know I have to cover this content. So what I do is I say, okay, so let's work it. So I have to cover 2 hours, I get it. So the first thing I'll do is I'll have the student read this chapter or part of this chapter, if I know who they are, and say, do this before you show up. And then what I'll do is my lesson plan will say, we're going to cover aerodynamics to here. we'll go to the flight to here, and this next thing we'll put into the next lesson, and makes it a, but the lesson plan drives, and so the syllabus is not complete for that module, but my lesson plan drove the amount of time I wanted or the time I had, and it said what I'm going to do in the lesson, right? So remember that there's a disconnect between an outline lesson plan, which that's what I'm talking about, and a lesson plan you're going to do for your check ride. So now let me show you our lesson plans and how sort of that's, and you can use anybody's. There's this backseat pilot. I don't know. There's a bunch of others. Some of them are so overly detailed that you go like, oh my God, I could, I'll never be able to teach anything other than the steep turns lesson because it's like 8 hours long if I do all this stuff. So, you know, and some of them are not well thought out because the people who write them, they're not educators. They're pilots who happen to teach flying. That's not an educator. An educator is someone who is an educator first, a pilot second. That is me, right? I'm a pilot second, even though my credentials would suggest otherwise, right? But I'm more interested in the education than I am about the flying, and about so that and so that's why I'm compelled to try to deliver training products and lesson plan other things in such a way that it does a lot of the heavy lifting for people who aren't educators. If you get that, maybe is the better point. Or it also helps students with tools. Like we have these flow charts and all this stuff that we use to direct you through the regulations. And that's by design, right? It wasn't just slopped together. It was like, well, what do students struggle with? They don't know where to start in the regulations. Okay, so then let's give them, if we just tell them the answer, if all you ever want is, I want to solo a student, I go to this place and I push a button and I say I have this stuff, that, and it gives you the answer every time. Well, that's nice, but that really, you never really understand the regulation in a way ever. It'll just be someone, and then when the regulation changes and no one updates that thing, you'll be now out of a job. You won't know what to do. So we have to provide the education first, right? All right, so now let's look at the lesson plans, which I'll do now. Or just an example of them, I should say. I gotta bring them up here. Okay, here they'll be. Yes, they're here. Never mind. We can same share. All right. So now let's go get some of these. And now you know this is the 3rd edition. So that means this is the current version. And so in the beginning of this, first there's a table of contents, which you can click on these and it'll take you to each of the lessons for private, commercial, whatever. And at the end, you'll see we start with the technical subject areas. So aeromedical, runway incursion, visual, aerodynamics, 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the academics ones, airspace, that kind of thing. And then, so then there's a little thing there to say hello, but this is the ones that tell you. And I've also put this in highlighted yellow. If you're going to be successful as a CFI or for a CFI check ride, you have to teach these lesson plans out loud. So you have to teach them out loud, because it's only when you teach them out loud that you can hear where you stumble and you can see if you got the order right. You can look at any lesson plan, read down through it, convince yourself that you know all that. And then you do that lesson, and then you get to the point on adverse yaw and you go like, oh, because you recognize it as words you know, but you didn't analyze it when you're looking at the lesson plan and say, what do I know about it? Right? You didn't do that. You'll do that when you're teaching out loud. When you're teaching out loud, you'll see and you'll be like, adverse yaw. Oh, I forgot what that was. Or I never understood what that was, or whatever it is. And then you can say, okay, I got to educate myself on that. But it's only, then you'll get the order. Maybe I should have put this instead of that. And you can modify your plan or whatever, but you have to teach them all out loud, even if there's no one in the room. Do it and you'll hear yourself talk. That's a good auditory learner, right? Would love that, because they love hearing themselves talk. Not because they love hearing themselves talk, but because that's how they process. You know, a good auditory learner or an auditory learner, when they read something and they paraphrase it out loud, they'll be like, oh, so that's what that means. That means if that's an auditory learner, right? Or someone who reads out loud is an auditory learner. Okay, so anyway, then we go on more here. And I think so airplane flying over, so give me just a second. I live right, this other house I live right underneath the downwind for an airport. So it can be a little noisy, but I didn't want to go to the flight school this morning. Okay, so anyway, there's that, and these are the maneuvers, and then there's some notes here. And I say, and no one ever reads these, they just go straight to the lesson plan, right? But like most instructors' actions are always the same, and students' actions are always this. So I just state it here, and that's it. They're not included in the lesson plan. Then it goes into what these things are. And then let's go to one. So let's pick one that's down deep here somewhere. Or I could actually use steep turns, right? I mean, that's the one I've been talking about. So it sounds like to be a one I might want to do. Let's see. Let me go to the TSC. Sorry, I'll get it there in a second. Another tip of the day, I guess I'll give you. If you have a flight school and you don't ever buy an inkjet printer and let anybody use it. What? He said, why is he telling me that? Because we have one at the school that we work with in. And every single time you go to use it, it's either low on ink or doesn't have any ink in it. And you look over during a CFI class and you see some guy has a binder, or girl has a binder with about that much paper. And they printed it from that printer, right? And of course the ink is like $900, right? So you go like, oh, that's not good. So the thing to do is do what I did. You buy a LaserJet printer, which doesn't print color. And I was very specific in that it doesn't print double-sided. It only prints single-sided. That way the person goes like, oh, I don't want to have a binder that's that thick. I want a binder, so I need double-sided. So that they won't do it usually. So there's your tip of the day. Okay, page 19. Let's go into page 19. And then I'll show you just outline of it. Okay. And our lesson, the titles are up here. I can't see. My screen is very small on this Mac. So the issue sometimes I have during these things, I've got to move you guys out of the way. It's your webcams. And in the chat window, I still need up. And so I have less real estate and I can't see the page numbers or something will happen. There's a better solution there somewhere. I know what it is. It's get a bigger Mac, right? That solves the problem. But then, probably do that sometime. I know when I can do that. Yeah, steep turns. Okay. When I can buy a bigger Mac is when all of you, every single one of you, plus 10 of your friends, goes and buys, I don't know, all of our shit. Then then I can go do that. That's kind of funny. Okay. All right. Let me go to this thing and bring up an annotation tool. And then I want to show you an academics lesson quickly. So this is the steep turn one. So here's the objective. Here's the motivation. Here's the presentation, or what's the elements, 20 minutes long. And these are the exact right order to teach this in. We have done these lesson plans for hundreds of CFI students. They would have told us if it's not working for them by now. And they've been refined over the years, right? So the order, if you do the order right, now notice it doesn't tell you how to teach this. It says this is what you teach, right? So then it's up to you to see if you need anything else behind this lesson plan. Like, for example, maybe you want a calculator show some images from the airplane flying handbook or the PHAC, or that's fine. You can do that. And then these are the key points I bring out. What are the key points of the maneuver? And that's not in the traditional lesson plan, but I put them in there so that you'd know more. Then there's risk management. This is copy paste from the ACS, but we're supposed to be teaching it. And so I wanted to put it on the lesson plan so you can see as you're teaching it, if you can run your eye down here and say, did I cover any of that when I was teaching up here? If you have, then okay. If not, then you can go on. There's always an image. And then there's questions for the student. Sometimes 3, sometimes 5, sometimes more. These are questions to test the student's understanding before we go. And again, these aren't on the traditional FAA lesson plans, but they're in ours because we think they're important. Then there's a maneuvers guide for a 172, how to do it in a 172. It's only good for a 172. Okay. And then common errors, which are here. And then there's some images here. Then there's completion standards from here. That's copy paste from the ACS. Again, these are completion standards for private pilot, and there's some other for commercial. The ones for the individual student, you'll have to pick. And there are some pictures here. So that's the way they go. So that's a maneuver-based lesson. Now if I scroll down here, to a academics lesson. I'll find one here in a second. So, okay, so this is aerodynamics. That'd be a good one, right? Seems like the right thing to do. Let's go to the top of it. Okay. All right, I think this is this is aerodynamics, lift and drag, lesson 1 of 4. And so this is what will be covered. It'll be 45 minutes. And then we're going to cover these things. And this is how to cover it, in the order to cover it. Again, the lesson plan shouldn't be teaching you how to do it. That's up to you, and your own knowledge, right? So, but it does show the order and what you should be showing. So you get to about 15 things. Then you'll teach about drag and thrust, certain number of things. Wing design and plan form, not much there, but a little thing. And then there's some images, right? So the images are like supporting images, so you don't have to go grab them. In terms of angle of attack, relative wind to climb, these kind of things. Bernoulli's principle, pressure changes on the wing. So these are all images for you to use during your presentation if you need something like that, or you feel you want that. There's the lift and drag thing there. And this is adverse, or not, wingtip vortices and induced drag. And then this is why you have induced drag, what happens here. Ground effect, plan form, and so on. Now again, so where's the lesson? The lesson's in the beginning. The lesson isn't, this is supporting images for you to use, but the outline is in the beginning. So this is the outline, what you're going to cover. Now this could take you 2 hours. It could take you 45 minutes. It depends on the student. If they're a commercial student, this is not going to take as long because they know most of it. All right, so that's where it is. So let's see, so we can summarize a little bit. A lesson plan is an instructional guide to a single instructional period. So it means it's good for, you have a syllabus which covers the entire class or the entire thing, and then that's divided into individual time slots. The lesson plan drives those time slots. What am I going to do in those time slots? What do I have to do? And it will depend whether it's an academics lesson or a maneuvers lesson as to what it is. So if you don't think teaching flying is easy, okay, I shouldn't say easy. If you don't think it's something you can do without a lot of training, then go to any big flight academy. Go to AeroGuard down in Phoenix and look at the students. The students are 400 Chinese students, and look at the instructors. There's 80 of them, all with 251 hours, about, right? 255 hours. How is that possible, right? Well, it's because all the academics are done in ground schools. So the students all go to a ground school. The instructor never gives any ground instruction around the aeronautical knowledge areas. So then the instructor does what? They give a briefing on the maneuver. They go do the maneuver. They do a post-flight. And on it goes. That's all it ever is. And so they do 6 students a day or 5 students, whatever, depending on the lesson. And you can just say, send Bob out to do training with this person. Well, Bob is, he just finished standardization and he's not a very good teacher. Does it matter? Just go make it look like a steep turn, right? And then go out and make it look like a steep turn. And after a particular period of time, you get better at it, and you begin to see how the fundamentals instructing and the Aviation Instructor's Handbook has elements of truth in it. And you go, well, now I can be a more efficient teacher. But in the beginning, we sort of just throw you to the lions and an academy and go like, I don't care, you don't like it, go out and you're going to do steep turns today. I did steep turns yesterday. Great. Now you're going to do 400 more today. So whatever it is, right? Because everybody's at the same level in training. That's your worst nightmare, is when you have everybody at the same exact place. I had one time where I had 4 CFI students, 4 of them, right? And they were all at exactly the same place. So every lesson was a repeat of the last lesson, which was chandelles. And each time I did 15 chandelles, right? So now 15 times 4, I did 60 today. You almost want to blow your brains out when that happens, right? You go like, not another day of slow flight. Please, can I do something else? Anything else? But it goes like that. And so then the thing I like now is, because I do CFI training, I get to mix up between academics and flight side. So it's not just one thing, over and over and over again. But that's what it is in an academy. And then the cross countries are few and far between. So you have only a small amount of that to do, and the minimum times usually, not very much time. There's a little bit of other interesting things like night flying, a little bit of things. But for the most part, it's go to the practice area, and we say flight instruction is like sausage making. You'll say, what? Yeah. So you don't want to go with what goes inside, as long as it looks like a sausage when it's done, right? So it can be a big disaster. But as long as it looks like a sausage when it's all finished, yeah, that's it. But the academics is a little different. The academics is harder. And so that's why I usually take that out of the flight instructor's control in the academy and just let them do the flight side. And then you do stage checks, and you do chief pilot, assistant chiefs. We'll do the stage checks and see if there's the real safety concerns or deficiencies in training. Then we can take that 252-hour CFI and say, I need to bring you back into standards or stands and take care of some things here first, so I let you go out anymore, because your students are not doesn't look like a steep turn. It looks like I don't know, it looks like something that isn't a steep turn. Or landings, the students are landing flat or almost prop strike every time. Something going on here. So it's kind of like that. So that's what that looks like. But the lesson plan is, so they will have their own lesson plans, those big 141 schools that will be for each lesson. And that will just tell you what you need to cover. It won't be a lesson plan, it'll be what you've got to cover. It'll still be up to you to decide how you're going to cover it for the most part. And again, they're not going to teach you every single thing about every single other thing. So you're supposed to be a bit of an educator. And so when you're an educator, that means what? That means that you use a lesson plan that's organized. And by the way, don't show the lesson plan to the student. Don't put this up on a board, right? Or don't project this up. Anyway, the lesson plan drives the order. The reason you don't put it up, because the student will read it when you're talking. And if you do that, if you put up a lot of text on a page, then the student will be reading something while you're talking. And then you'll think you covered it and it's all done, but the student won't really have heard that part. So if you're going to bring up anything, there's a tool here in the you can buy called Mouse Pose, MOUSEPOSE, and it's what it is a little spotlight tool. That's, I don't have it here, but it's a spotlight, and you can make everything else in the background dims, and you can sort of make this line its own, and you can show it as you go. Or you can make this a keynote or a power note and just put every one of these bullet points on a slide. Just one thing on a slide, nothing else. Don't clutter the slide with anything other than, just like Apple's keynote. When Tim Cook delivers the keynote, he doesn't have a paragraph of text up there. There's one single statement, maybe an image, or maybe a video. That's it. And it doesn't matter if you have 500 slides in your keynote. If you trimmed it down to 15 slides with reams and reams of text on the slide, the content would just be lost. So do not show anything, no more than 5 things on a slide, number one, never more than 5 things on a slide, and make the most important thing the biggest thing in your content. The most important thing should be the biggest thing, all right? So the title, most PowerPoint or keynotes are the biggest thing. That's not the most important thing. The most important thing is the content. So take the titles and shrink them, make the content big. And again, just one line. And that should, as you step through the presentation, it should drive you with what to say. Like when you see Tim Cook deliver the new iPhone 30 or whatever it's going to be, the line of text comes up and he just starts talking because he knows the content. That's a teacher. It's an educator. That's a presenter. If you need all the stuff on the slide to remind you what to do, you're just cluttering it up for the student. Because again, then what happens is that thing you're projecting onto is the presentation. And in my world, I'm the presentation. That's just a visual aid for me. That projector or the monitor is just a visual aid. It's not the presentation. The day the presentation becomes that, then I might as well just play a video. All right? There's no point to that. Okay, so I think we're closing down to it. Let's see. So, I mean, that's an idea. And this was basically how to use commercially developed lesson plans to solve your dilemma of how am I going to teach a student how to fly? And how you're going to teach a student how to fly is by learning how to teach from lesson plans. That's instead of creating your own. If you create your own, I can tell you how long this will take. This will take the equivalent of, I would say, somewhere on the order. So it'd take about 6 hours a day times about 20. You need about 140 to 200 hours to create half of the lesson plans, because what will happen in the training programs that you go to, if you go to somewhere else, is you'll end up starting them and you'll just end up focusing on the ones that are going to be on the test or likely to be on the test, the commercial maneuvers. So those will be really good. The others will be just sort of hacked together. So what I'm suggesting you do is don't take that approach. So get your aeronautical knowledge up from whatever method you want, or our online course does that. And then, what does it say? Are there, I just have a question. It says, are there outlines up for subscription or purchase without joining. Yeah, you don't have to come to one of our classes. You never have to actually attend in person, and some people don't, because there's two ways you could do that. You can just take the online course, which has everything in it, including all the lesson plans. It comes with a thing we call CFI Essentials, which has all of our custom authored content, everything we make, along with all the FAA handbooks, everything organized in folders, like 4 folders, and then subfolders below that. That's really popular and handy. So, and then, or you could buy that separately. You don't even have to buy the online course to get that. But the online course is what we use as our flagship sort of thing, because when you take that, you really have good aeronautical knowledge, and you're ready to meet with your local instructor and do one-to-one to get you up to speed on the things you didn't quite get 100%. And you also have the CFI Essentials, which is all of our flow charts, all of our workbooks, all of our lesson plan, everything is in there. And then the 7-day class that we do is a put it together class. It's an assembly class, which means that you show up and we do scenario-based training in that class. We do things like today we're going to talk about student pilots, how to solo students, how to send them on cross countries, the endorsements, and we use the ACs. It's like a practical using it. And we're also going to be teaching in that class. You're going to be teaching the class. If I have to teach you academics knowledge and then do that at the same time, then that class is 2 to 3, 4 weeks long. I can't get it done. That's why we do the online class. Then we can finish that class in 7 days. If what you just said was I'll come to your sit down class, and that's what I'll do, and I won't do the online, I won't do it. I don't think you're going to be very successful unless you've finished a lot of academic stuff somewhere else before, because we assume that part is kind of 80%, 70% there. Like we'll assume that aerodynamics is 80% there when you come in because you've taken our online class. But if it's 20% there and you sit down in the class, you're not really going to know that when that time comes. You're going to be like, well, that's going too fast. Well, it's because you're supposed to have known that ahead of time, right? So that's why we can take it into 7 days. Plus, don't forget, we do the flight. If you do flights with us, you're going to be flying in the mornings. In Miami, between 7 and 11, the flights go out. The class starts 11, goes to 6, right? If you're in Palo Alto, the flights, class start date is 8 a.m. It goes to 3, the flights go in the afternoon. So we get somewhere around 7, 8 hours of time before that end of that first week. And the second week is then just one-to-one training. So it's one-to-one with your instructor and the balance of the flight side, whatever needs to get it look like a sausage, right? To get it up to speed, right? So that's why we can finish everything in the 2 weeks then usually because of that. But if you don't, so if you go somewhere, if you get our stuff, if you're going to do that, you have to get the online course for sure. If you're going to go do it off with someone else, that's fine. And then the other side is if you're not going to do that, then just get CFI Essentials, and then you'll have all the resources that you'd ever need. And in case you'll have to figure out how to do the training, but it won't be, it'll give you a leg up there. But if you do the whole thing, well, that's great. And we have half the class won't fly with us. Half the class will go fly with someone else, which is because they know their own DPE back home, and they have taken every single test with them. There could be a lot of reasons for that, and that's all fine. But, do that on your strengths. Okay, I think that's where we are today. I'm happy that you showed up and happy that I made it to Northern California, and I'll be back in Miami next week. So the next one will be from Miami Beach with any luck, or from Miami at Opelika at our school. And then we'll cover what I said, which I don't remember what it was, but it's here. Let's quickly look at it. It's going to be this one. This one. Share. So it will be, it's on Pylons, a deep dive. You're finally going to know next week. You're going to know that this had an incredibly practical application. It was used by the U.S. It was used by the military, and was used by the mail service along some other people. It's called for fun. It's called a long line loiter. Ooh, that's something, isn't it? So I'll discuss all that with you, and we'll work up the entire thing, and you'll finally understand this maneuver maybe for the first time, and you understand why it's one of the best maneuvers for commercial training or to develop an instinctual control of the airplane that's ever been out there. All right, I'm going to log off and go on with the day. I got a lot to do here, and I'm on the East Coast time or the West Coast time now, so it's I'm not quite adjusted to that yet. So I got up at 6 a.m. today, or it's 5:30, whatever it was. So anyway, I'll see you guys next week, and Nick will send you a summary of this along with whatever he's going to send you. But you always get an email after the class, and he'll do that. And that's it. I'm going to log off. So I saw Gary Weaver. Hi, Gary, and Soledad. I see that. And some other people that I know. Andrew from the class. I see a lot of people in there. I didn't look at the whole list today, but I did see you as you came in, each one of you. So, all right. We'll see you next week. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting.